call-in show, addressing the issues of our day from a distinctly Orthodox perspective. You can join the conversation by calling in at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Father Tom is the priest at St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and welcomes guests from across the globe to discuss important topics of interest. Here's Father Tom.
Welcome to Ancient Faith Today. This is Father Tom Soroka, and I'm so glad that you're with us this evening. And good afternoon to those who are listening to us live from Australia. We'll be taking your calls in a bit at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Trudy will be answering your calls, so please make sure to turn the show volume off before you come on air. Now, we temporarily don't have the chat room up yet, but we do encourage you to go either to the AFR Facebook site at facebook.com/ancientfaithradio, place a question in the thread for tonight's show, where it is being live simulcast, or you can also go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/ancientfaithtoday and place your question there in the thread for tonight's show. You can even send us an email at aft@ancientfaith.com. So let's get started. In the United States, this is Thanksgiving week, and it's become a sort of unofficial kickoff to the holiday season. Many schools are taking a short break, and workplaces are taking a few days off so that everyone can reflect on what they're thankful for, have a nice meal with family, and simply take a rest. Besides eating and watching sports, one of the favorite pastimes during the holiday season will be watching movies. Now, since we're in the pandemic, many theaters are still shut down. Hollywood has scaled back new production, but streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Hulu are doing booming business. 62% of adults in the United States subscribe to at least one streaming movie service, and at least half of U.S. adults pay between $10 and $20 a month just on these services. It's a $16 billion a year business in the United States. And statistics show that U.S. adults spend an average of 142 minutes per week. That's 2 hours and 22 minutes streaming video. Movies seem to be a universally captivating medium. They tell stories which envelop our senses, and masterful directors and producers can make us feel empathy both for the heroes and even for the villains. Films can teach, illustrate, illuminate, inspire, and inform. And certainly, for Orthodox Christians, with our rich incarnational theology, film is the perfect medium to tell our own stories and to share the rich creativity of Orthodox Christians who can introduce the world to the pathos of the Orthodox Christian life in Christ. And since the year 2000, films with Orthodox Christian themes have been growing in number. Profound movies like The Island, the Russian film Ostrov, The Priest, Pop, and the upcoming movie about St. Nectarius called Man of God show orthodoxy in its best light, that is, the light of Christ. The question is, are we encouraging and supporting Orthodox filmmakers to create content that presents captivating stories about Orthodox Christian themes? Our next guest is here to talk about his efforts to promote Orthodox Christian filmmakers. Chris Vladnacios is an Orthodox media expert and owner of Transfigure Media. Operating since 2008, Transfigure has become the world's biggest, the creative works and services of Orthodox talent. Born in Melbourne, Australia, Chris graduated from Victoria University, completing a double degree in law and marketing. While at university, Chris made several short films, worked on the sets of many others, and established the Queen Street Film Festival from 2005 to 2009. But in 2014, Chris founded Bisenfest, the International Orthodox Christian Film Festival, with screens online and is hosted in several countries. Bisenfest 2020 streamed feature films for the first time, as well as shorts. The festival's aim is to help grow and foster Orthodox cinema for a global audience. You can learn more about his work at transfiguremedia.com and at bisenfest.com. And so with that introduction, Chris Vladnacios, welcome to Ancient Faith Today.
Thank you very much, Father. Thanks a lot.
I'm so glad that you're here. It is Wednesday afternoon in Australia. How's everything going there? And how are things going with the pandemic?
Well, I could start on a more positive note. It's a beautiful sunny day here because we're actually entering into summer. It's just a glorious afternoon, and we've actually just begun to open up again. We were in quarantine for well over 6 weeks, and actually a little bit longer. It's a bit of a blur, quite frankly.
Yeah, sure.
But we're slowly getting back to a sort of normal. But it's still a very strange life, and I guess what we've learned in Melbourne is being a lot more about ourselves, and also what is actually very important in life. But there's more about that later, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we at Ancient Faith love our Australian viewers and listeners because we know that there are hundreds of thousands of Orthodox Christians in Australia, most of them of Greek extraction, of course. And we just want you to know that we care about you very much, and we love our listeners in Australia. And it was our topic for today. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your spiritual journey, but also then how you became interested in furthering orthodoxy in film.
Well, Father, as you mentioned before, I've been born and raised in Melbourne in Australia. It's the second largest city in Australia. I actually grew up in a really beautiful suburb not far from the CBD, the main city. However, I got to really experience a very sort of Australiana type childhood with like a lot of gum. That was a very inspiring part of my childhood. I'm a second generation Greek Australian. My parents are of Greek descent, and I actually have two older brothers, and we all pursued degrees in law, as you mentioned earlier. However, I actually work in construction instead. I moved to television, and I could remember lines from movies off by heart and recite them many times over. But it wasn't until I was actually at university, at high school actually, thanks to my English teacher, who made me realize that I could actually maybe do something with film. The connection I have with film is really becoming absorbed with the message that the film is trying to not just tell us, but to show us. And then when I entered into university, I became more interested in the whole filmmaking process. And I actually got involved with a local film project, which taught me the basics of filmmaking and just gave me a much better appreciation of cinema. And during this whole time, even going way back to my childhood, the spiritual development with my family, we would frequently go to church. And but I always felt like I didn't fully understand my orthodoxy, but I was so intrigued by how there was this beauty that seemed to only exist in the church. And as soon as I left, this was when I was younger, as soon as I left, it's like, why isn't this sort of in the rest of the world? It's like I go to this place, church it is, and then it's like there's this amazing richness that I want to carry it with me everywhere I go through life. Right. So that started from a very young age, and I've always been intrigued by just the elegance and the transcendent nature of the church. I've always been fascinated by the traditions and the teachings. So as I guess from my teenage years, as I got older, I just began to read more and want to practice my faith more strongly. And then the secular field of media, because I was doing my law and marketing degree, but I also was thinking of film. And then I contemplated, well, I don't want to jeopardize one for the other. So I began to think, what does an Orthodox filmmaker or an Orthodox media person, how should they be thinking and how should they actually carry that into their job. It was also during the time, as you mentioned, I had established a film festival, which it was a short film festival, and it's just funny how it all started. It came about when I was in a law lecture doing corporations law, and I was quite bored with it, and I admired the hall, how it was set up, the lecture hall, and I thought, oh, I'll do what a lot of Australian filmmakers do when they don't make any films for university. And they were very supportive as I screened all these student films. However, I wasn't coming across any, not only just no Orthodox films, but no Christian films or films that looked like they had at least a Christian sensitivity to them. So
Right.
I started to become very, I guess, I wanted something better than what was coming through, and to throw into the mix. And this is actually what bore Transfigure Media. I was in my final year of university, and I was doing my honors paper. I'm not sure what the equivalent is in America, but it's basically a very big paper which would give me an extra title to my law degree. And as I was doing that and finishing my final exams, I was still doing the Queen Street Film Festival. And that's when I met this person who, because what happened was, at first he seemed all positive and, very helpful. And there seems to be no, he seemed pretty honest. And look, it's a long story, but there was a lot of darkness within his heart. And then when I started to see some films that he had never shown me, that he had made, I
Wow.
distinctly remember this memory that was the real turning point, where you're in a darkened hall. We're watching his latest short film, and I won't say what the film was about because the audience I don't know who's listening. It was quite graphic, and it shocked me to think that the creator of that was sitting right next to me. And I distinctly remember, as the light was bouncing off the screen onto his face, that he was smiling, and I was absolutely horrified. And then
Wow.
it was from that I spoke to my spiritual father about how to get through this challenge, because this person had been basically, I'd signed him on to help me, and he had, in a very short period of time, basically got control of the festival. So that was something I was never expecting. And the advice of my spiritual father was just so very simple, just to hold my ground and to maintain who I am, and not to just not to compromise. So I did that, and I thought, this is not going to end well. But it was just remarkable how, and long story short, he basically quit the next day, and I had regained control of the festival. And it was after that experience, and this was in the year 2008. And this was at a time when Facebook, I think, was just really sort of starting to gain a bit of popularity. Social media was not really in what it is today. And I contemplated, well, what about other Orthodox Christians? I'm sure I'm not the only Orthodox Christian who's practicing who wishes to work in the media, and especially in film. And I looked at not just film, but other forms of human creativity. And it's what it is today. If you go to the site, you'll see all sorts of human expression, but all done by Orthodox Christians. And that's one thing I like to just emphasize, that whether it's a filmmaker or an artist, simply calling yourself an Orthodox Christian is not enough. It has an actual living experience in the church, and is part of the church community, because that's the only way you develop your phronema, and that's what really brings out Orthodox creativity. It's that phronema that we carry with us, which is very unique. But we can, I guess, talk about that a little bit later too, if you like.
Indeed. Well, actually, that phronema, we've been talking. We actually talked with Dr. Jeannie Constantinou last week, and she was on the previous show talking about that exact topic. And so you had captured that idea very well, that as Orthodox Christians, we have this incredible beauty, we have this incredible depth that we can share with the world. And I think it can come out in the creativity of the bigger issue of sort of Orthodox movies, right? So I think on the one hand, I don't want to be misunderstood. And by Orthodox movies, I don't simply mean shooting a divine liturgy, or, just a movie about
Yes.
some very obvious Orthodox theme, right? It should be about what Orthodox Christians have. So tell me about your vision for that. And also, what are some of your favorite Orthodox movies? I know that there's not really a ton to choose from. I'm thinking of, I think the first Orthodox movie that I was ever aware of was the movie about the iconographer. And now the title just escaped me.
Andrei Rublev?
It's a very Andrei Rublev.
Yes.
It's It's by Tarkovsky, and it's a very old movie, but one of the, usually when they talk about like the top 10 movies of all time, they usually throw that one in there.
Yes.
So what are some of your favorite Orthodox themed movies?
Oh, goodness, Father. I could just talk for hours about Tarkovsky, quite frankly. He's an absolute genius, and not just even a genius. He's actually he's highly regarded by all filmmakers, secular filmmakers, and they've even commented that his filmmaking is actually a form of recently. But there's a reason for that, but there actually are many. You just have to look. But in terms of your first question, which was what do I sort of envision for Orthodox movies or Orthodox cinema? I say experience.
Okay.
I see that there's sort of two types of what you would say Orthodox films, Orthodox filmmaking. You have the films which have a very expressed and very obvious spiritual message, such as Andrei Rublev or Priest's Son, which is a film that came out a couple of years ago, which you can find online. But there's also the other branch of what I would call them like they're Orthodox films which don't have that really expressed spiritual message in it. However, it's done with what I call an Orthodox approach. So, for example, it could be a comedy, but it's done through an Orthodox approach. And what I mean by that is, if you are truly serious about your spiritual life and also being an artist, that what you expose yourself to will be reflected in your art. And there are actually many examples online. One example I can think of off the top of my head, I'll plug an Australian duo here, the two brothers. It's called the Robertson Brothers. You can find them on YouTube, and they do a whole lot of different skits, short little videos, beautifully done. With a very they got the two types of Orthodox filmmaking process, which is one is the more expressed spiritual message, and other ones which are just comedy, doing science fiction, just experimenting with different genres, but it's all done with an Orthodox approach. And they've always said that they always pray before they film. So that's what's very important, to actually make sure you do. What is Orthodox cinema? I learned that it's really no different to how we are as Orthodox Christians when we get out of bed and we go to work and we deal with the barista who's making our coffee, or it's not just simply what we do at church, it's even what we do outside of church. And if we approach day-to-day life in an Orthodox way, then why can't we approach it in the same way with art? In terms of one of my favorite Orthodox films, definitely, of course, The Island, Ostrov. That was like the first Orthodox film I had actually seen, before I saw any of Andrei Tarkovsky's work. There's actually so many others. There's, I mentioned earlier, called Priest's Son, and that was with Keri Hiro Tagawa, who actually converted to Orthodoxy after making that film.
Right?
Yes. And
very famous martial artist. Filmmaker.
From Mortal Kombat. That's correct.
Yeah, that's right.
And when you watch him in the film role, you just see how he really absorbed that Orthodox format, and he expressed it, even though at that stage he was not Orthodox. You could see that there were artists that I've met who have converted to Orthodoxy, and that's a lot of them are from America. And these are for iconographers, photographers, illustrators. What they've all said to me, and I couldn't believe it, over the years, what they've all said in common is that the Orthodox faith is the only place, the only Christian church where they actually found that there creativity was not just even with our architecture in church and our traditions, but even I'm also a huge fan of learning about local cultures, local Orthodox cultures. And whether I'm in Greece or just looking at other ones like Romanian or Serbian, I love looking at folk art and where you see these humble people express spiritual concepts in their artwork. And it's because they're doing it out of love and they're using their talents to express that. And then it becomes like the beauty they use to decorate their homes. That's one thing I've noticed with Orthodox creativity. It really becomes entrenched even within your bones and especially in your heart. Other films, I definitely recommend if you're going to want to watch real classic Orthodox cinema, and if you want to watch somebody who's truly inspired so many, not just Orthodox, but non-Orthodox, even non-believers in cinema, Andrei Tarkovsky is... They refer to him as a visual poet, and he actually had a father who was a poet, and his mother was a literary professor. So he has a beautiful grasp on expressing very deep concepts in very beautifully visual ways. And even at the very core of all his films, there was always a spiritual dimension. So for anyone who wants to learn what perfect Orthodox cinema is, watch any one of his 7 feature films, and some of his there's also some short films he had made, but he is like really there's also a huge amount of content out there, short films too, and of course that's where Bison Fest I guess fills in that gap as well.
And we're gonna get to the short films in a second. I did want to say one thing. You had mentioned about comedy, and obviously on the one hand, when we think about Orthodoxy, it's very serious. It's it's very deep. But our Orthodox cultures are extremely celebratory, and they are lighthearted and fun-loving. And there's the one scene in the island in Ostrov that I love, and that is when the monk has his abbot in his cell with him where the furnace is. And he what he does is the abbot brings in his very fine pillow top mat, and he has his beautiful boots and so forth, and he lays everything down and he falls asleep, and then the monk gets up and throws his boots into the fire, and he's like exercising them like a demon, and it's one of the best scenes. It made such an impression on me, and you're absolutely right. Just the way that this particular film online, there's all kinds of with English subtitles. If you just type in The Island with English subtitles, it's out there. I want to remind our listeners, 1-855-AF-RADIO. Call in and let us know, what are some of your favorite films? And I would even say, not just sort of like specifically Orthodox Christian films necessarily, but spiritually uplifting films. There are other films that I've watched over the years that were quite spiritually profound. Call in and let us know, what films do you like? What films do you recommend? That and of course Orthodox films. We'd like to hear your opinion about that too. So let's do this. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about your film festival, Bizenfest, and we're going to talk about some of those short films that people can go online and watch and hear more about this. We are on with Chris Vladnacios, and we're talking about...
Father Tom will be back in a moment. In the meantime, the lines are open at 855...
Hi all, Bobby Maddox here, station manager of Ancient Faith Radio. Just wanted to let you know that the Renaissance Fund has generously agreed to assist our fundraising efforts over the Thanksgiving holiday by matching your gift dollar for dollar up to $50,000. What this means is that any donation you make to AFR between November 24th and December 2nd will be doubled until we reach this $50,000 goal. Please join us and make your donation by clicking on the support tab in the upper right-hand corner of ancientfaith.com. As always, we thank you so much for your listenership and your generosity.
We're back with Ancient Faith Today and Father Tom Soroka. Give us a call at 855-237-2346. Here once again is Father Tom.
We're back with Chris Vladnacios, and we're talking about Orthodox films, Orthodox creativity in film, in cinema. And there's so many amazing things coming out. And what Chris does is he encourages the creation of Orthodox filmmakers to promote in their media their thoughts, their ideas from an Orthodox Christian perspective. Not to get off topic, Chris, but one of our listeners wrote in that he said one of his favorite films is Being There, starring Peter Sellers. Are you familiar with that, Being There?
No, I can't say I am familiar, no.
I looked it up. I think I've watched it before. It's a 1979 American satire, and it's very highly rated, 8 out of 10 on IMDb, 95% from Rotten Tomatoes, and probably be worth it. Because there are films out there that sort of have a somewhat of a spiritual message, even if they don't get all the details right. There are things that can be edifying to us. All right, 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Chris, tell us about your film festival. And this has been going on for many years now. And you had quite an array of different films, that different types of films, short films, full-length films, and so forth, that were entered into Bisenfest. And also you gave awards and so forth. So tell us a little bit about it, and tell us about this year's winners and notables.
Well, just a little rundown about Bisenfest, how it came to be. It was in 2014 that I actually had the idea. It was after I had been watching actually a documentary about online film festivals and how they were gaining a lot of popularity around the world. And I thought, something like that. I was actually about to go for my first trip overseas. So I thought, maybe when I get back, maybe in a year or two, I can do it. And it was upon coming back from about 2 months that I discovered that my mum had developed advanced breast cancer. And that really hit me quite hard. And then all of a sudden, everything, Transfigure Media, just all took a back seat. And for the first couple months, it was going for chemo, detoxing, doctor's appointments, just monitoring temperatures, all that sort of thing. It was a very dark time for me. But I distinctly remember when we went for my mum's first chemo session, and the facility that we went to, I remember it was a room full of all these other people, and everyone's connected to the machine. And just having to hear that sound, I'll never forget that sound of the machines ticking over as they're basically pumping in poison into you. But the one thing that got me through that very, especially that first 15 minutes was unbearable, would be looking out of this window that they had. And they had preserved, it was a new building, and they preserved this beautiful, I'm not sure what type of tree, maybe an oak tree, this massive grand oak tree. And I honestly believe they deliberately left it there to give the patients who are doing their treatment some sense of hope, to see this natural beauty. And as the light was coming through, there was like a green glow in the room because it was fully leaved. And I've always had that image stuck in my mind of like this living tree,
Wow.
And then I decided to go for a little break, and it was this. There was this facility they actually have at this hospital, where it encourages artistic expression. And I remember walking through and just seeing all these patients and some of the amazing stuff they did, and the whole, I guess, their philosophy was through art you can achieve a sense of healing. And I thought to myself, someone who's Orthodox, or what would the Orthodox approach be towards this? And it then dawned on me, well, art is a way of firstly making sense of the world, and it's also about using the skills that God has given directly. But maybe I could sort of take how I'm feeling and what my mum's going through and make it. So that's what really spurred Bisenfest at that time. And it developed very quickly. I was actually quite surprised because I thought it would be a lot of hard work, but it actually came about very easily. It was then I continued on to 2015, and then I had met my now wife, and I got distracted and I took a bit of a break, and then I started again in 2019 and of course 2020. And I have to say 2020 has been a very challenging year, of course, for all of us.
Right,
But insight into that, whatever challenge we go through, that God actually has given us the means to overcome it. So I actually found that this year's festival, I've learned a lot to become a lot more resilient, and hopefully the films have become, inspired others, hopefully.
Very, very good. I was watching a particular movie from your YouTube channel. And so anybody that wants to go there can go to youtube.com/ByzanFest, ByzanFest. And you'll see the movies there from at least some of the shorts and so forth in the list there. One of the movies that I really enjoyed was, and it was from 5 years ago, it's called Wine Grower. And it's about two monks, an older monk and a younger monk. It is a beautiful, and there's almost no dialogue in the entire film, but the film itself is about 25 minutes long. And it is, I think, one of the most beautiful examples of a sort of like an explicitly Orthodox film. That is, it has Orthodox themes. It's about these two monks helping one another and so forth. It's really magnificent. So I would really encourage people to go out there. Tell me about some of the other films that you feel are notable, especially this year.
Well, just before I launch into some of the excellent quality that came through, with The Wine Grower, the same filmmakers, it's a husband and wife team, Ivan and Monja Jovic from Serbia. They've actually made a film which was also Pauline, which is another fantastic film. And they're also producing another film, actually they're going to film it in Greece. It's called The Shadows of the Mediterranean. So from that was their first short film, and now they've progressed into feature. And actually, by the way, listeners, if you do go to the channel, you'll notice that the 2020 collection is not there. It was temporarily taken down only because the festival had ended. However, I got some good news, which you're the first to hear. The playlist, the 2020 collection, is actually going to be relaunched Friday, Australian time, which will be in America Thursday, because in Australia we live in the future. But you get to hear it first.
Excellent.
So what the films you'll get to see again. The features aren't available right now, but we'll see in the future. But some films I highly recommend from 2020 is, well, it actually won all the short film categories. So best film, best director, best cinematography, is a film from Romania called 500. And it's a film about a woman who is she's basically on her last leg, and she's about to give up completely. And she can't sort of spoil how it all goes or how it ends. But this man looks like he might actually be able to save her. And she can't explain why, but there's something very mystical about him. And the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. It was a film that was basically had to be made. And the key character, the young man in the film, has actually now become a monk and is now living at a monastery as a novice. And actually, that's something that I've found very interesting in Orthodox creativity in general. There's many people who are artists who actually later on become monks or nuns. So, I just found that actually very interesting, yes. But some other films I highly recommend. The Third Grace, it's actually from France, and from a nunnery, I think it's it's a few hours north of Paris, and there's very little dialogue except the Jesus Prayer, which you get to hear in French, but it's just beautifully shot, showing just the simple day-to-day lives of the nuns and just the intricate beauty that comes in doing tasks, especially when you do it with God in mind. Another short film I highly recommend is The Rite of Homegang, which is actually from Australia, and it's actually from the brothers Robertson. It's a mixture of Australian Russian and Viking influences, and it's actually all the dialogue is actually in Old Norse, and it tells of ancient Christianity entering into Viking culture and a showdown in a duel that happens between two warriors, one a pagan and one an ancient Christian, obviously Orthodox. So that's got some fantastic shots, great fight scenes. But yeah, they'll be live soon in a day or two. So I highly recommend that as
great.
well.
Yeah, I wanted to see that one, so I'm looking forward when that comes out.
I look forward to hearing your feedback, Barbara.
There's New Men, which I know Ancient Faith Media had a hand in, and it's a beautiful film about a men's monastery not too far from where I live, about 6 hours south in West Virginia, about their life there. It's a magnificent and beautiful film.
Now, I have to say that film really cleaned up really well. Again, that film also won pretty much all the feature film awards except Best Documentary. So that was meeting Sam Cox as well, just hearing his story too. He, in a networking session we did with other filmmakers, he mentioned that he wasn't actually Orthodox at that time, and the film actually, he believed, led him to orthodoxy. And that was strange because I've also heard that several times from other filmmakers. There was also the filmmaker Kevin Bryce, who did 2 feature films as well. He too became drawn to orthodoxy during the filming process. So, New Men is stunning. Just seeing all 4 seasons and how he shoots them. And that's his first film. I honestly thought he was like an experienced filmmaker of maybe, 10 years at least. So I honestly can't wait for his next work, which he said, he hopes to have ready for next year. So I'm waiting on Sam to get back to me.
That's fantastic. And that's great.
No, it was excellent. I was actually a bit worried how many features would I actually get this year, being the first time doing this, but I actually had to reject other films. So no, I can't wait for 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. I find the whole process fascinating because when we think of big, cinematic types of films, obviously in Hollywood and Bollywood, and I'm sure there are big movie production studios in Australia that have multi-million-dollar budgets. But the reality is, correct me if I'm wrong, with today's technology, you can shoot even, 8K video on an iPhone now. You can purchase cameras that have video capability with, tremendous lenses and so forth. So does that make it a little bit easier now for people that are aspiring to be a filmmaker, either short or cinema length, to be able to do this because the equipment is so accessible?
Honestly, look, it is a big factor. Look, having access to the equipment, to the software, and even to funds, of course. However, I actually put that question forward to the filmmakers, and I was actually really shocked. But at the same time, strangely not surprised when I heard their response of what do they feel is the biggest hurdle to the filmmaking process. And I thought it would be, money. But it was actually having a sense of actually believing they could do it, and actually having somebody to actually encourage them. And actually 2 of them wasn't Fest. So they said, and had it maybe not been for them, they didn't feel that their films were good enough. So what I've actually found is that filmmakers, the reason why filmmakers make films, it's not necessarily just for money. I mean, of course, it would be nice to make money from film as easily as some people can. However, what it really comes down to is knowing that people will actually see their works and people will appreciate it. Sometimes just getting a kind word or hearing a thank you is actually more than a filmmaker would ever expect. So I really think it's just knowing that people actually will watch their films and just have that emotional encouragement seems to be a bigger factor than actual money. And also it's about maintaining a sense of community, because one thing with Orthodox creativity is it's not just artists working by themselves. It really is and especially through Transfigure Media, it's really a global community. Because, for example, in Australia, unlike the American experience, I would say, I haven't been to America, but from what I've learned over the years is you've had Orthodoxy in your country longer than Australia. We've only been really since the mass migration of the 1950s, pretty much.
Oh, wow.
We still have the mentality of Orthodoxy here is that when you finish school, you go get a degree in pharmacy or medicine or law or accountancy or something like that. But in America, I noticed that with Orthodox, there's more, I guess you could say, freedom to pursue other careers. So here in Australia, we don't really have a massive Orthodox film network or community. But in America, and of course in the old Orthodox lands, there is. And that's where I get most of my content, and that's who I work with most of the time.
That's interesting. And I think there is the idea of, using your talents as a creative outlet. Now, I don't mean to put a rosy picture on the Orthodoxy in the States here, because obviously we have many, many problems and divisions and so forth. But there is probably something about the entrepreneurial spirit in America that allows people the freedom to say, yeah, I think I want to create this film, or I want to do that.
Exactly.
And that's really
that's what I love about Americans.
Yeah, that's why I felt like this this show was important, because I have knowledge of Russian, but my background is Russian too. So I don't have a problem with looking at these films from Russia in Russian and struggling through them and so forth. But I think that's still a barrier for some people. However, to me, what it does is it inspires to say, yeah, we should be able to do something like this. We have the sort of as you use that term, that phronema, that mindset to say, this is something that we need to offer the world. I have a listener here that just wrote in, and he said one of his favorite movies, Dr. Zhivago. So in Dr. Zhivago, you have that opening scene in the cemetery where his mother is being buried and so forth, and it's extremely moving. And that's probably, I think that movie is like from the 60s, right? So that's like the first exposure that some people have to Orthodox Christianity, and it is visually very stunning, that particular scene. So I think we have a lot to offer. 1-855-AF Radio. Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Vav, I was just going to say, speaking of, we could say in like inverted commas, Orthodox movies, some films which we would probably say are secular films, but ones which I actually found had a really strong spiritual message in the actual films. Unfortunately, I don't think you'll find them in America, but there were two films I remember over the years I've seen. One called The Door, which was about a man who his young daughter drowns in a pool, and then 5 years later, when he goes back to the house and he wants to then kill himself, he discovers this portal which takes him to an exact replica of the world, but 5 years earlier, and he ends up saving his daughter. And what happens in the film, look, if you can find it, it's called The Door. It's from Germany. And what actually happens in it is at what length people will go to preserve or to fix their mistakes. And look, the ending is fantastic because it's a film about reconciliation. It's a film about regret. It's a film about the way, whatever sins you've committed, how to try to make amends for them, and sacrifice. And even though it's not, directly a spiritual film, but it had components which, as a priest, you probably have people who ask you questions about how to go through when they go through certain trials. And I just found that film quite inspiring, even to help me with my Orthodox life. And
Indeed.
Another film that popped up in my mind just before, one called Harry's Daughters, which talks about mental illness and also about tension in a family, and also it actually does have a Christian element to it about what happens when someone in the family dies and who's to blame, and then finding out what's really behind it. That was an excellent movie I saw years ago. But a more recent one I watched just recently, it was really big at the cinemas, and you might think this is odd, La La Land. The reason why is because it's an
That's
absolute
the
joy
musical.
to watch. Yeah, yes.
She
With,
sings in there, right? Yeah.
yeah, and with Ryan Gosling in it. But what I loved about that film is that it does. And look, even in Orthodox, we talk. It's not all about just heavy stuff, as you mentioned. We're very festive. We're very festive faith. And in that film, it looks at joy, it looks at love, and it also looks at bittersweet endings. And look, that's stuff that we go through in our spiritual life, and there's no reason why we can't watch a film which is just simply for the sake of joy, or which doesn't conflict with our spiritual life. It can actually, sometimes these secular films can actually help us, because even Saint Basil, in his letter to the youth, look, that's a stunning work. It's only a short letter, but I learned so much from that about as a creator and also as a consumer of content, because he talks to the youth of Athens about what kind of literature they're exposed there, talking to the children, but specifically the parents about what their youth should be reading or what plays they should go and see. And that's where we get the concept of to be the bee, which then later Paisios talks about, Porphyrios. And he talks about take what's good from what is there. So even sometimes from something that is a secular piece of art, there might be some benefit to us. So he wrote this 1700 years ago, and I think that could be used as like as a measuring stick for when we question, what should I watch? Is this really worth it? If there's only like a little speck of benefit, then it's not. But if there's actually some traces of benefit to us, it could be spiritual benefit, it could be even just aesthetical benefit, then it would be all right to watch. But look, that's something that could be another lecture, I guess.
Absolutely. There was another movie that came to my mind that I really enjoyed. It's a documentary, but it really doesn't feel like a documentary. It feels more like a drama, and that is that movie Mr. Vig and the Nun. Have you ever seen that?
No, I've been meaning to, but I have
lovely.
Got it saved somewhere.
You've got to watch it. It's wonderful, and it's about this old gentleman who lives by himself in this enormous house. And this group of Russian Orthodox nuns come. He donates this place and says, you can set up your monastery there. And then the tension starts between him and the abbess of the monastery as more nuns come. It is the most delightful and wonderful. I would highly recommend that everybody go watch that. It's online. It's called The Monastery, Mr. Vig, Vig, and the Nun. It's wonderful, and it's a documentary, but it really doesn't feel like a documentary at all. Okay, we only have a few minutes, Chris. So please go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to quickly mention another film that's called, I think it's called Lost. It's from Russia. It's on YouTube. The resolution's not very good, but it's a film that's basically an Orthodox themed film with it's a cross to Memento and a bit of a Western. It absolutely fantastic. It's actually a thriller, and the spiritual message really hits you hard at the very end. So I just wanted to mention that. But so go ahead, Father.
No, I was just going to say that we also had an email come in, and it's very famous in my part of the United States, and that is The Deer Hunter. It's a brutal movie. It's about the Vietnam War and so forth, but it has that scene in there of the Orthodox wedding, and that was filmed in Cleveland, Ohio. But it's always seen as a quote unquote Orthodox movie, but it's actually, that's a pretty brutal movie. That's
actually with that film, because I do remember the wedding scene, and of course the reflections of Russian culture in America. One thing that I find with whenever you do see Orthodox references or Orthodox people in film, look, in my opinion, there's sort of two main camps you have. You have like, and this is in popular films, you have like the sort of the Greek themed orthodoxy they show, which is always like more of a cultural expression. And then unfortunately, and I've noticed this whenever they want to show Russian orthodoxy in film, of course, it's very unfortunate. It's always in a very sometimes negative. Well, I guess negative is in my opinion. I feel that's just you're going to think this is crazy, but honestly, I think it's just a carry on from the paranoia of the Cold War. And what you had was, you had like the Soviet Union, and now what I've noticed is in films, it's almost like Soviet orthodoxy. That's what it seems to have developed into now, and that's why you have these sinister notes in there. But I just thought to sort of, express my opinion on that. I don't know how you feel about that.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That is quite prevalent. And maybe I could just throw this question out to you, and that is, how do we turn that around? In other words, are we going to allow Hollywood to set our own narrative, or are we going to really bring the Orthodox message out in film forward in a more positive and uplifting way? So, how do you suggest we turn that around?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question. And when I've thought about that in the past, I've always wondered, like, how can we work with such a massive system which really has the power to push back anything that they don't want to show or they don't want to give a voice to. And I think back to the ancient church, where for the first almost 400 years Christianity was illegal. Christians were slaughtered left, right, and center, but we still survived and we maintained the faith. And it makes me think that, well, how do we do in this modern question and this modern dilemma? What do we do? And I think it's not about fighting it; it's more about doing what they did too. They just went about being who they were, and we should be who we are. That is, being Orthodox Christians. We just keep going and doing what we do, not in spite of the system, but in just doing what naturally we do. If you're an Orthodox filmmaker, you want to make a film with an Orthodox approach or Orthodox aroma, just do it. Don't have that, I'm going to do this because I want to sucker to Netflix or or something like that. It's more about, if you make something that's beautiful. Strange enough, there's been so many times of, like for example, of music, where you have like these bands that no one, they play in like, dingy places, and then they get noticed because they offer something unique, they offer something special, they offer something beautiful, and then all of a sudden they become mainstream. So what I think is, we just need to keep doing what we do, and eventually, just like the ancient church, people will hear about it, people will be inspired, because if we try to fight it, then they say, "Oh, you're just as dirty as what the others are." Like how they use those same tactics. I think it's just about being who we are and just being persistent. I really think that's the key.
Good. Well, you are helping that cause very, very much by bringing forth your talents and organizing everyone and getting everybody on the same page and giving exposure to Orthodox filmmakers that really need our support and our help. And like you said, our encouragement, our viewership. We want to be able to allow people to have their expressive outlet, and we want to encourage them. So Chris Vladnacios, thank you very much. We would encourage everybody to go to transfiguremedia.com and Byzanfest, BYZANFEST.com. And as Chris said, this Thursday night in the States and Friday morning, the feature films, right, Chris, will be back up.
The short films. The short films will be made available again. Excuse me. Yes, that's okay.
And the feature films, usually you can find them on Vimeo, correct?
Some of them, for example, New Men is on Vimeo as well, and also, of course, on Ancient Faith, and also Ancient and Marvelous, which was also another one of the features. I've seen on your website on ancientfaith.com. You can watch there too. But honestly, it's just you need to stay tuned because there's new films coming out. There's actually, like you mentioned, Man of God. There's also one called The Great Job. And there's actually a whole bunch of documentaries that are due for release next year as well. So it's just you just got to keep your ear to the ground. I mean, there's no other way to put it. But I just want to finish off by just saying if there's any budding filmmakers out there or anybody who wants to help produce a film, an Orthodox film, what I do is I help connect these people with people who could probably help. And I also now am hosting 4 times a year a Zoom networking session with Orthodox filmmakers. So if anybody's interested in that, please just to contact me through the Bisonfest website. And just keep following those pages, and you'll get to see not just films but other content as well.
Very good. Thanks for joining us. I was going to say this evening, but this afternoon for you. We appreciate all of your work and best wishes and much success for many more films to come in the future. God bless you. Thank you very much.
And you as well,
appreciate
Father.
Your time.
Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Thank you.
All right. So many thanks again to Chris Vladnacios for joining us. If you want to visit his website there, go to bisonfest.com or transfiguremedia.com. Also, we want to thank Trudy for engineering the program, for everybody that's listening in, for those who sent in some questions and comments. God has given us the ability to think higher thoughts, to create beautiful works of art. And film is such an incredible medium to inspire people and to learn more about our Orthodox faith, to expose them to the beauty of Orthodoxy. Imagine if we could harness the creative powers of so many Orthodox Christians who want to develop content on film and in cinema to inspire both Orthodox Christians and others to draw closer to Christ. May God help us find a way to make it so with his help. That's our show for tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/ancientfaithtoday. Share out our program after that's posted. Give us your feedback and contact us with any ideas or topics that you might want to. Good night, everybody.